Welcome to the No Rain, No Rainbows podcast. This is a show about pushing through obstacles and hard times in order to live a happy and fulfilled life. I'm your host, Ted Phaeton, and it's a pleasure to have you joining us. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Let's grow. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the No Rain, No Rainbows podcast. It's always a pleasure to have you. And as always, big shout out to my executive producer, Andre Suttles, of Subtle Solution Media, helping this podcast be possible. Today, give a little golf clap. We have Brionna Morse on the Zoom call on the podcast for us this afternoon. How you doing today?
I'm great. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. It's a pleasure to have you. I'm so glad we were able to connect and make this happen. I know we kind of pass each other in the gym here and there sometimes, like passing ships in the wind, huh?
Yeah. We have like a quick chat. I know that you're like moving on to your next, set of whatever. I'm moving on to my next set of whatever somewhere else. And yeah, it is always good to see you. I know that you're like ending your day at the gym typically, right?
Yeah, that's kind of when I'm like signing off. I've already worked a full shift and kind of on my way home after that.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I know we, chatted about this earlier, but I'm kind of grateful that you brought me on because I know that most of your No Rain, No Rainbow episodes have been male dominant. So I'm stoked to be a female on here to, share a different perspective and maybe a fresh look at things. And
yeah. Well, shout out to you and shout out to all the lady listeners out there. We're not forgetting about you, and Brionna's about to drop some bombs for us. But before we get into all that, why not introduce yourself and let everyone know who you are and what it is you do?
Yeah, so I'm a transplant to the upstate from Southern California. I was actually born in Southern California, and then my family moved to Idaho. I grew up on a 75-acre farm and then got recruited to play volleyball back at a D3 school in SoCal. So went there and then lived there until I decided to pack up all of my stuff and move all the way across the country and start a new life out here. I have a license in marriage and family therapy in the state of California that I've held for 15 years now. So I've been in the mental health and therapy world for a very, very long time. And I've been in the online coaching space for about 3 years now. And I'm completely loving it. I've really found my niche over the last couple of years. And so I predominantly focus now on working with high-level achievers and entrepreneurs and business owners who have this super successful career and they're thriving in their job and moving up the ladder, you might say, but then in their personal life, whether it be in their relationships or their health or just their overall happiness and fulfillment is just like tanking. And they don't understand why there's such a disconnect, but they know that there's something missing. And I, work with them on creating a more balanced life between that success of their professional life with the success of their personal life, so they can actually enjoy the freedom that they've worked really hard to create, and not be held back by everything. So
yeah, and that's one of the main reasons having you on the podcast. I think it's going to be so helpful for our listeners and so many people watching on YouTube, because a lot of us, as we have that ambition part, we sometimes get trapped in it, and almost the qualities that make us so successful in our career or so successful in business actually works as a detriment in other areas of our lives, and we have a hard time balancing that, myself included. So I'm excited for some of the value that you can help us with along the way throughout the episode. But I do know when you were in California before coming to the upstate, you did work, your practice mainly focused on at-risk children, correct?
On kids, yeah. So when I went into the short story of my like education background was I went into college with a psychology major. I'm going to be a therapist. I'm going to be a school therapist is what I wanted to do. Took Psych 101 and almost failed. And I was like, screw this crap. I suck at psychology. I can't do this anymore. So, that was just as a note, that was when 9/11 happened and I was playing volleyball and I was like, I had zero friends and I had zero time to do anything. So I think I was just completely overwhelmed moving to a new state, new school, playing sports. So anyways, I changed my major to liberal studies to teach. And when I graduated and went into the credential program, I was at the same time working as at a residential treatment center for kids that were, it was a level 14, so right before juvenile hall or the psych ward. And these kids were children between the age of 10 and 18 who were, either wards of the state, had been, pulled out of the home because of neglect, abandonment, or abuse, were kids with like major anger, emotional issues. So they were being pulled from the home because they were being a danger to themselves and others. And I was loving working with these kids and at the same time hating the credential program because I'm a rule follower when it comes to many things, but when it comes to the way that I want to do things to help people, I don't want to follow the rules because we individually as humans, like we don't learn the same and we don't come from the same background. So in my head, it was like, how can I teach Jane to learn the same way that Bill learns, because they come from different backgrounds and they come from different socioeconomic statuses and families, and one is a visual learner, one is a tactile learner. Like there's no way. Yeah. And so I was like, this isn't for me. And I went back and got my master's in psychology, which I loved and I did great at because, I was in a different headspace. And I opened up my private practice 3 years after I graduated. And my focus was on families who had adopted kids from overseas. I had a attachment background, so I was working with a lot of children who had major trauma issues and attachment issues. And I was helping those families to not only address the trauma of the child that they adopted, but help really integrate that child into the family in a healthier way so that like the family was more cohesive. Yeah. So yeah. And it was funny because I always said, oh, I'm never going to work with adults. I don't want to deal with any of that. Like, I'd rather just work with kids. You can play, you can draw, everything's a lot lighter. Yeah. But the reality was like, I was seeing these kids who were like suicidal, like cutting themselves. They were, breaking things. They were doing like massive damage to the family. So it was just as heavy. But I loved it. I've still I have 3 clients right now that I'm seeing again that I saw when they were 10, 11, and 12. And now they're like, freshmen in college, seniors in high school. I'm like, they've grown up. Yeah.
I love something you said before about how when it comes to helping people, you don't want to follow the rules. That reminds me of a quote I heard saying how the system is easy, but people as a whole are complicated. We're not all templates. We don't come out of a set template the same way. So to apply us all to the same system almost sets us all up for failure.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And there's already so much rigidity in the world that like we're all, and I mean, I think I'm guilty of it at times too, trying to fit into all of these boxes to make sure that we look successful or feel successful. And those are the same things that hold us back from really being who we're supposed to be, And so I just, as I was going through that program, it was like, I already know that I don't check all the boxes. So if I go into a school and try to teach, they're going to be like, you're breaking this rule, you're breaking this rule. So I'd rather just do something where, people come to me because they like the fact that I am an outside of the box thinker and that I do things differently and that I don't, fit into the norm. Because, there was a time even in my while I was in undergrad and I was working at the residential treatment center, I remember when I got my first tattoo, it was like, you have to cover that up because other kids might think this or that or this. And it's like, but it's a flower and a dragonfly. Like, what are you going to think? It's nothing terrible, And again, like that set in the motion for me. Like, I want people to come to me because I make them, or I guess the better word is I allow them to feel more comfortable being who they are. And that's the great starting place to learn about themselves,
Something you said before and about when you first studied psychology and going back to get your master's in it and being in a different headspace. It's interesting to see that parallel Do you think your personal growth helped you have that outside thinking with psychology as a whole to kind of like be more of like, I don't want to say rebellious, but against a, hey, I'm not going to be cookie cutter going into this, so I'm not going to put cookie cutterness on other people. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it's a twofold. What I know about myself now is that I, in the past, have been very good about making my life really hard and
Okay.
putting my own barriers up to like, my road was never like this. It was like this to get to here.
How
Um,
so?
yeah. So for the listeners that don't watch YouTube, I'm moving my hands back and forth, up and down, left and right, like I'm going on some windy road. But I think the other piece of that was that, the trajectory of going to college and creating a career, I think there's this expectation that you have to have it all figured out. And what I realized along the way was I really didn't have it all figured out. And it was okay for me to like switch from wanting to go into psychology to a teacher, then doing nothing for just a little bit, then going back once I figured it out. And, again, going back to that rigidity, like we have been cultivated to be a part of this fast-paced living. And it wasn't until I slowed down and just really took my time to decide that it was like, oh, this is what fits me. And it fits me because I like things to be different. And I like to work in ways that maybe other people don't. Mm-hmm. And, it's funny because in a lot of my jobs, as I was interning and stuff through my master's program, like there was so much micromanaging. There were so many, like, you have to make sure you do this, but not this, or, paperwork is a big deal, worry about the clients, but the paperwork is important too. And it was like, I didn't go to school to do paperwork. Like I went to school to change lives. Like I went to school to give hope to kids that like never had it before. And I think that was for me, like when things started to shift, going back into that master's program was like, I'm going to start a private practice because my job is to see people and help them change their lives, not do a bunch of paperwork, not like be told that these are the things that are important. Yeah. For me, I knew what was important deep down in my heart and what my passion and purpose were.
I love that. And so I guess let me ask you this, because I feel like there's such a conflict that happens within us because we have two wants that conflict each other. We want to be unique and we want to be ourselves, but we also want to fit in and roll with the crowd. And those two don't always fit together. How can we go about finding our fit?
Yeah. Well, I think that like, and it's interesting because a lot of my clients, some of their more, my clients now, a lot of their core wounds come from this desire to be loved and accepted. Mm-hmm. And I know that feeling is very familiar to me. And what I work on and what I've done for myself and what I know to be true is like, there's a line between being accepted because you want to belong to something and being accepted because if you're not, then that means you're not enough or unlovable or unimportant or right? Like there's a negative attachment to it.
Yeah.
And so I think if we can separate those things and know that being accepted is a part of it's a part of our human nature, right? Like as humans, we've been like for way back in the day, been a part of some pod. So to be accepted is important because we all play a role in our community in some way. But knowing that that role does not define who we are as the person at our core.
Yes.
It's the way to separate from being an individual and being accepted. That I know who I am as me, Brionna, but that being accepted into my community is important because I play a role in that community in X, Y, and Z way.
Yeah. And for any of the folks that are listening that might think, well, I don't have a community. How can they go about finding a community? Because if they're somewhere they're not accepted.
Yes. Well, let me tell you, moving from Southern California to here was not an easy feat. Mm-hmm. South Carolina is a very hard place to fit into as a transplant.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I learned to do first off was like, I started like friending the most random people on social media. Like one of the girls that I first friended, she was a photographer, because I thought, oh, I want to get some professional pictures taken. It'll be fun. She denied my request as a friend because she thought that I was one of those like women that like seeks out like sex and all that stuff on.
Oh,
You know what I'm
really?
talking about? Those like
Yeah.
shady profiles. So she denied me. And then I friended her again because I was like, what the heck? And maybe she didn't see it. And then she went through my profile and sent me a message and said, I am so sorry that I denied your friend request the first time. I thought that you were one of those like bots that,
Yeah.
you know, was trying to do something. And she's one of my dearest friends now. So one thing that I would tell anybody is like, you've got to put yourself out there to be seen and connect. Like it's the only way to truly start doing it. And then honestly, it's trial and error. Like I have friends that I created when I first got here that I don't really talk to anymore. And that's not because of them or because of me. We've outgrown each other and we've gone different ways. And the friendships that I have now, like it literally took me 3 years, and I've been here for a little over 3. It took me 3 years to build the friends that I have that I know are like true, real, deep friendships. Yeah. And I'm going to be 38 this year. So like it's, as you get older, it doesn't get any easier, you know. This isn't like time to make friends.
Yeah, I do hear that a lot. Speaking of the clients that you've seen while being here and going through the whole growth, and I know there's a wealth of knowledge that you could share right now on the topic, but when you mentioned about helping high achievers or helping people go through that transition themselves, even just those tidbits of putting yourself out there in a new environment or finding a new community, a lot of it, I imagine you've learned through personal experience as well as through your studies. What would you say from, I guess, a general view that from all the clients you've seen and everyone you've been able to work with, what would you say is kind of one of the common denominator that holds a lot of people back from bridging that gap of their professional lives to personal lives, or when something's slacking in their life? What it has been missing?
Fear of failure or fear of success.
Oh, wow.
They go either way. And both of those are always driven by a lack of self-worth that most of us as high achievers never want to admit to.
Yeah.
You know, as a high achiever, like the way that we're seen in our professional life, there is success there. We have proof, right? Like our business is running successfully. We're moving up in the corporate ladder chain. You know, I'm getting clients all the time. So there's always some sort of proof around that. But what happens is, and I would never admit this, and you probably wouldn't either, but like I would praise the world around how confident I was, how much I believed I was worthy of all the great things. But if you looked at the reflection of what I was doing in my daily life, it never matched. And that's exactly what my clients go through, is like, there's all this success here, but there's always an underlying fear of failure or fear of success that is driven by some sort of lack of self-worth that drives them to like choose terrible partners in their relationships, or be afraid to commit, or, you know, can't stop working. They have to pour into it all the time, or they're always saying yes to everyone when they really want to say no.
Yeah.
You know, they disregard their health. Like there's such a long gamut of things, but it's always goes back to fear of failure, fear of success.
How do we face that fear?
You got to go deep. It's not just jumping off the ledge, right? Like we face the fear from a backwards, you know, philosophy that I, you know, coach with my clients, which is that our mind directs our actions, but our belief directs our mind. So you have to go back to the current belief systems that you stand in to reset the way that you think, to reset your actions. And it's interesting because a lot of my clients will say, well, I know that I'm ... or I know that I want to be successful, or I know that I'm not a failure. And my response to them always is, you can know your way into everything, but your belief is always going to your belief is always going to be what drives your choice.
Wow. Yeah.
So there's a big difference between what you know and what you believe. It's the head and the heart.
Yeah.
It's a big difference.
And I think a lot of us don't take the time to listen to the heart. We listen to the head, and the head's loud. It's so loud.
Yeah.
How
And we
can we
keep ourselves busy. We keep ourselves so busy that we can't get quiet enough to even listen.
Yeah, I was going to mention, how do we listen to our heart?
Yeah.
Does it take stopping and slowing down?
Yeah. So it takes consistent downtime. A lot of my clients are always like, well, I can't relax. I don't have the time to do it. Well, you do have the time. You're just choosing not to use it in that way. So
Mm-hmm.
it's always about sitting in that quiet space. That's why I said the mornings for me are so important, because I do take a good, sometimes I can only take 5 minutes, but it's typically between 15 and 20 where I just sit and whether it's through journaling or just deep breathing, sometimes it's a meditation. Like, there's no rules here, but we have to learn to be quiet in our own space so that we can get connected to our thoughts. I have so many of my clients that'll say like, oh, I've never really journaled before, and now that I've started, like, I can't stop, and the things that are coming out are kind of like I didn't even know that stuff existed.
Yeah.
So we're really good at thinking our way through and out of things without paying attention to where the thoughts are actually coming from and what they're related to or what they're connected to.
Yeah.
So that downtime is so important.
So you're talking to somebody who used to be all about work, action, push, push.
Mm-hmm.
I've added the habit of meditating. I've added the habit of starting to journal more, which I haven't done much long form journaling, which I hear that's where the best quality of your journaling can come from. I usually journal each night, just write my thoughts down. But
Yeah, I call it brain dumping. At
yeah,
night, it's amazing.
so I've gotten in those practices, but I wasn't always sold on it. And it almost took doing in order for me to believe it. But for someone that's stubborn, like myself, that's listening and they've heard a million times they should meditate. They've heard a million times some of these practices that you just mentioned in order to listening to the heart, especially when you're talking to high achievers here.
Yes.
You mentioned, hey, slow down,
Yeah.
sit still for about 30 minutes and don't do anything. That's hard for them to comprehend. How can we bridge that gap?
Well, I would probably say something like, okay, well, so if your results were a person and they stood right in front of you, what would they say you need in order to get to what you're really wanting?
Yeah.
And if they said, well, you need to do more, which is what might be a normal response, I'd say, okay, so you've already tried that, and how has that worked out for you?
Yep.
Because we've been trained, right, that like, if you do more, you'll get a better result. But I work with my clients to do less, and they actually get a better result.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't actually have to do more to get more. You can do less and get more, if not more. Because just like you mentioned earlier, they're not spread so thin. They're not burnt out. They're not stressed out. They're not overwhelmed. So the way that they're able to not only complete their work, but then invest into their relationships and their health and their overall happiness, it doesn't have to come at a cost or a price anymore.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. And the feedback that I get from my clients is like, holy crap, like I would have never thought that like sitting and just being okay with being still and doing nothing would actually allow me the time freedom to, start looking at investing in a property or create a new business. Like my clients are doing all kinds of things that they never would have done if they hadn't have just stopped and realized how much their thoughts are the thing hindering them from getting what they really want out of life.
Yeah. And it's all about that counterintuitiveness of slowing down a little bit, listening to the heart more so than the mind, and then implementing what you hear.
Yeah.
What were some of, I guess, the personal rewards you've seen in your life once you started implementing some of those practices?
Well, first and foremost has been better boundaries in my relationships. That was my MO. Was I was seeking my enoughness and my validation and my acceptance in relationships. And when I wasn't getting it, I would do more to try and earn it,
Mm-hmm.
or I would seek out someone that would pour into me in the ways that I should have been able to do myself. So I've learned to create very healthy relationships. And that part I'm like the most grateful for, because I used to go crazy trying to like make something work, and that's just not how it works.
Yeah.
But besides that, it's been like an overall sense of like peace of mind, and like not obsessing or stressing over things. Like everything just comes lightly to me now. It never feels like this, I don't know, other than to squeeze my hands together. Like it doesn't feel, nothing feels pressured anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest one for me, that the feedback that I've gotten from people that have known me since me moving here in the beginning is like, they can see how happy I am. Like they see it in my energy and in my smile and my face. Like there's no more pretending my way through anything. Like they can just tell that I'm living in a space that like I know I belong, and I know what I want, and I know what I want to do, and all of it just comes naturally. So those have been the three biggest rewards for me.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you mentioned before you're working on a series, or you're working on some content.
Yeah.
I want to talk about some of the rainbows you're working on now,
Okay.
and things you're excited for in the future.
Yeah. So a few things that are already happening. So the great thing about being an entrepreneur, and what I really encourage people who run their own business, is to really create like tiers of income, where you've got streams coming in from different ways, where you're not always having to be investing all of your time into this one thing that then literally sucks you dry and burns you out. So I have a business partner that is a holistic nutritional coach, and she and I created what's called Restore. And it's a program for women who want to lose weight and repair their relationship with food. We have a membership program that is a monthly membership that some join. And then we have a 8-week program that's more intensive that some will join. So those are our two programs that we work on together. And then I have my one-to-one clients that I work with. I only take a certain amount. They typically commit to work with me for 3 to 6 months. So that window stays very short for the amount of time that I bring new one-on-one clients in. And with them, it's like I said, it's a 12-week kind of system that I've created, that I walk them through to get them to where they want to go. Most of them end up hiring me for another like 3 to 6 months, just as like accountability and follow up and stuff like that. And I'm working on a new program. It's a mini mastermind that it's needed based on the feedback that I'm getting from clients and people wanting to work with me, that just the timing hasn't been right. And it's called Breakthrough to You. And it's a 6-week online mastermind to help high-level achievers and entrepreneurs break through the barriers that are holding them back from living in their true happiness and freedom, so that they can enjoy the life that they've created. So it's going to be, weekly live trainings, and then there's going to be some one-on-one additions on the backside. But I'm super excited about it. So
Nice.
It's kind of like a very squished, condensed version of what I would do with a one-on-one client, but in a group setting.
Awesome. Well, that's really exciting. And I hope a lot of our listeners and some of the viewers want to take advantage of that when it comes out. Also, What's the best way they can reach you and follow some of the stuff that you're working on?
Yeah. So Instagram, my name is, Brionna, BRIONNA _Morse, MORSE. And on Facebook, it's the same. And my website and everything is on there, so they can click the links to find out more information. But obviously, if anything that I shared resonated, or they want to challenge, or they have questions about, like, they can feel free to message me or email me at brionnamorse@gmail.com, and I'll get back to them. I love having conversations about this kind of stuff. So
yeah, I mean, and something tells me we can go on and on and on. I hated to cut it short because we're coming up on our time here, so we might have to maybe have like a 2-part series or something. Perfect. To go deeper on some specific topics too, because I know I mainly focused on kind of helping to bridge that gap with what high achievers might be experiencing in their lives. But I do appreciate you taking the time today, and I'm going to be sure to put those links in the show notes.
Okay,
So
thank you.
folks can kind of just pull it up. If you're listening on the iTunes app, just open up the show notes. You can hit that button and it will take you straight to those links. But Brionna, I appreciate the time this afternoon. And whenever folks are listening to it, I appreciate their time too.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And like we always say at the end of the episode, everybody wants the sunshine, but they don't want the rain. But you can't get the pleasure without a little pain. Let's go.
Yeah.
Rabbit Trail. If you're looking for a place to grow your business, network with other professionals, and establish your own workspace, Camaraderie is the place to do so.